Welcome to my channel. Today I want to tell you something very important that can change the way you learn English forever. Many people think English is difficult, but the truth is very different. English is not difficult, it is just different. The problem is not your ability, the problem is the method you are using. You try to memorize too much, you try to learn too fast, and you try to be perfect from day one. But real learning never works like that. When you were a child, you did not learn your first language by studying grammar books. You learned by listening, repeating, and making mistakes every single day. That is the natural way of learning any language. And today, I am going to show you the same natural method that can help you improve step by step. Stay with me till the end, because what I am going to share can completely change your English journey. Chapter 1 today. I want to talk about something very important that most English learners never realize in the beginning. And this is the main reason why so many people study English for years, but still cannot speak fluently. You start with a lot of energy. You buy notebooks. You download apps. You watch videos. You learn grammar rules. You memorize vocabulary lists. But after some time, you feel stuck again. You cannot speak freely. You cannot think in English. And when someone talks to you in English, your mind suddenly becomes empty. You know the words, but you cannot use them. This is not your fault. This is the result of the wrong method. Let me tell you something very honestly. Most people are learning English like a school subject, not like a skill. They treat it like mathematics or science, where you read, memorize, and pass an exam. But English is not an exam subject. English is a living skill. It is something you use, not something you store in your mind like notes. If you only collect knowledge and never use it, then your English will always stay weak. It will always stay inside your mind, but never come out of your mouth. I remember when I started learning English, I made the same mistake. I thought that if I learn all grammar rules, I will automatically speak fluently. I spent hours reading books. I learned tenses, articles, prepositions, and many other rules. I could answer grammar questions very well, but when I tried to speak, I failed. My mind became blank. I would think in my native language first, then try to translate into English, and by the time I finished thinking, the moment was already gone. This made me frustrated and confused. I started thinking maybe I am not good at languages. But that was not true at all. The real problem was not me. The real problem was my method. I was learning English in a very unnatural way. Think about this. When a child learns a language, they do not start with grammar rules. They do not sit with books and memorize vocabulary. They listen first. They observe. They repeat sounds. They try to communicate even if they are wrong. Slowly and naturally, they become fluent. But in our case, we do the opposite. We start with theory. We start with rules. And we forget practice. That is why progress feels slow and painful. Another big mistake many learners make is waiting for perfection. They think they must learn everything before speaking. They think if they make mistakes, people will judge them. So they stay silent. They avoid speaking. They avoid practice. But let me tell you something very clear. Silence will never make you fluent. Only practice will. Mistakes are not your enemy. Mistakes are your teacher. Every mistake shows you what you need to improve. Every wrong sentence brings you one step closer to correct English. When I realized this truth, my entire learning journey changed. I stopped trying to be perfect. I started trying to be active. I started using English in small ways every day. Even simple sentences. Even broken English. Even short phrases. I did not care if it was correct or not. I just wanted to speak. Slowly, something amazing started to happen. My fear started disappearing. My confidence started growing. My brain started getting used to English sounds and sentence patterns. One more reason people fail is because they depend too much on memory. They try to memorize thousands of words, but they never use them in real life. And when you do not use something, your brain forgets it. That is how the human mind works. So instead of memorizing 1,000 words, it is better to use 10 words daily in real sentences. This is how real learning happens. Practice is more powerful than memorization. Let me give you a very simple example. Imagine you learn the word hungry. You write it in your notebook. You repeat it 5 times. But if you never say, I am hungry in real life, your brain will not fully learn it. But if you use it in daily life, even once or twice, your brain will remember it forever. That is the difference between passive learning and active learning. Most learners also think they need a perfect environment. They think they need English friends, English teachers, or English countries to improve. But this is not true. You can create your own English environment anywhere. You can talk to yourself. You can describe your daily routine in English. You can watch videos and repeat sentences. You can think in English while doing simple tasks. Learning does not depend on location. It depends on consistency. I want you to understand one powerful truth today. English is not something you study for a few days and master. It is something you build slowly, like a tree. You water it a little every day. You take care of it every day. And over time, it becomes strong. But if you stop caring, it stops growing. That is why consistency is more important than speed. Even 10 minutes of daily practice is better than 5 hours once a week. Many people also give up too early. They expect fast results. When they do not see improvement in a few weeks, they lose motivation. But language learning is a slow process. It takes time for your brain to adjust. At first, everything feels difficult. But slowly, your brain starts recognizing patterns. You start understanding without translating. You start speaking without thinking too much. This transformation takes time, but it is real. So in this chapter, I want you to remember one thing very clearly. The problem is not English. The problem is the way you are learning English. If you change your method, you will change your results. Stop memorizing only. Start using. Stop fearing mistakes. Start practicing. Stop waiting for perfection. Start speaking today. Because fluency does not come from knowledge alone. It comes from action, repetition, and courage. Chapter 2. Now, in this chapter, I want to share something very powerful with you that completely changed my English learning journey. After understanding that the problem was not English but my method, I started searching for the most natural way to learn a language. And then I discovered something very simple but extremely powerful. The first secret is listening. Yes, just listening. It sounds too easy, but this is exactly how every human being learns their first language in life. Think about it carefully. When you were a child, you did not start speaking immediately. You spent months just listening. You listened to your parents. You listened to people around you. You listened to sounds, words, and emotions. At that time, you did not understand anything, but your brain was still working. It was collecting patterns. It was recognizing sounds. It was slowly building a foundation without you even knowing it. And then one day you started speaking your first words. Not because someone forced you, but because your brain was ready. This is exactly what most English learners forget. They try to speak too early without listening enough. They try to produce words without feeding their brain enough input. And when they cannot speak, they feel frustrated. But the truth is very simple. You cannot speak a language that you have not heard enough. Listening is the foundation of speaking. When I realized this, I completely changed my routine. I stopped worrying about understanding every single word. Instead, I started focusing on exposure. I began listening to English every day. I listened to slow English videos, simple conversations, podcasts, and even songs. At first, it felt confusing. I could not understand most of it. But I did not stop. I continued listening again and again. Something interesting started happening after a few days. My brain started recognizing small words, then small sentences, then common phrases. Even when I was not trying to learn, my brain was learning automatically. This is the power of passive learning. You do not force it. You simply expose yourself to the language and let your brain do the work. Many learners make a big mistake here. They think if they do not understand everything, then listening is useless. But that is completely wrong. Understanding comes later. First comes familiarity. When you listen again and again, your brain becomes familiar with the rhythm of English. It starts recognizing where words begin and end. It starts understanding tone and emotion. And slowly, understanding develops naturally. Let me give you a very simple example. When you hear a song for the first time, you may not understand the lyrics. But after listening to it many times, you start remembering parts of it. Then you start singing along. You did not memorize it like a lesson. You absorbed it naturally. That is exactly how language learning works. In my personal journey, I used to listen while doing simple daily tasks. I would listen while walking. I would listen while eating. I would listen before sleeping. I did not put pressure on myself to study. I just surrounded myself with English. Slowly, English became part of my environment. And when something becomes part of your environment, your brain accepts it naturally. Another powerful thing I noticed is that listening improves your speaking automatically. When you listen more, your brain stores sentence patterns. So when you try to speak, those patterns come out naturally. You do not need to think too much. You do not need to translate word by word. The sentences start forming on their own. This is how fluency develops. I also want to tell you something very important. Do not worry about perfect content. You do not need difficult movies or advanced podcasts. You need simple English. You need clear pronunciation. You need slow and understandable speech. Because your goal is not entertainment. Your goal is training your ears. At the beginning, I used to replay the same audio many times. One short video, I would listen to it 5 or 6 times. The first time, I would just try to understand the main idea. The second time, I would notice familiar words. The third time, I would focus on pronunciation. The fourth time, I would repeat after the speaker. This simple habit made a huge difference in my listening ability. Another thing I learned is that listening builds confidence. When you hear English regularly, it stops feeling strange. It starts feeling normal. And when something feels normal, fear disappears. Many learners are afraid of speaking English because English sounds foreign to them. But when you listen every day, that fear slowly goes away. English becomes familiar, like a friend. I also want to tell you that you do not need to understand 100%. Even understanding 30% is enough in the beginning. Your brain will fill the gaps automatically over time. The most important thing is consistency. Even 10 to 20 minutes of daily listening can change everything if you do it regularly. Sometimes I used to feel like I was not improving. I thought maybe listening is not working. But after a few weeks, I suddenly realized I could understand more than before. That is how learning works. Progress is silent. It does not show itself immediately. But if you continue, it appears suddenly. So in this chapter, I want you to remember one simple truth. Listening is not optional. It is the foundation of fluency. If you want to speak English naturally, you must first fill your mind with English sounds. Do not rush. Do not panic. Just listen every day, even if you understand very little. Because every time you listen, your brain is learning, even when you feel like you are not. Chapter 3. Now in this chapter, I want to share with you one of the most important turning points in my English learning journey. After I started listening every day and slowly building my understanding, I still had one big problem. I could understand a little English, but I could not speak. I could think about sentences in my mind, but when I tried to open my mouth, everything disappeared. My mind went blank again. I felt like I had knowledge inside me, but I could not use it in real life. That is when I discovered the second powerful secret of learning English. And that secret is speaking from day one, even if you are alone, even if you are not perfect, even if you make mistakes. Let me tell you something very clearly. Most learners wait too long to start speaking. They think speaking should come after grammar, after vocabulary, after listening, after everything is perfect. But that is a big mistake. Speaking is not the final step. Speaking is part of the learning process from the beginning. If you wait too long, your fear will grow. And the more you delay speaking, the harder it becomes to start. When I realized this, I started something very simple. I started talking to myself. Yes, it may sound strange at first, but this is one of the most powerful techniques for beginners. I would look around my room and describe everything in English. I would say things like, I am sitting on the chair. I am holding my phone. I am opening the door. I am drinking water. At first, it felt awkward. I felt like I was doing something silly, but I continued anyway. Slowly, something amazing started to happen. My mouth started getting used to English sounds. My brain started forming sentences faster. I did not need to think in my native language first. I started directly producing simple English sentences. This is the beginning of fluency. Not perfection, but comfort. Many learners are afraid of speaking because they think people will judge them. They think they must speak correct English all the time. But let me tell you something important. No one becomes fluent without making mistakes. Every fluent speaker in the world has made thousands of mistakes. Mistakes are not failure. Mistakes are practice. If you are making mistakes, it means you are trying. And if you are trying, you are improving. I remember in the beginning, I used to stop in the middle of sentences. I would forget words. I would mix grammar rules. But I did not stop speaking. I kept going even with broken sentences. I told myself that fluency is more important than perfection. Communication is more important than correctness. If the other person can understand me, then I am successful. Another powerful method I used was imagining conversations. I would imagine that I am in a restaurant. I would imagine ordering food in English. I would say in my mind, I would like a burger, please. Can I have some water? How much is this? I created fake situations and practiced speaking them out loud. This helped my brain prepare for real conversations in real life. Over time, I started feeling more confident. My fear started reducing. Before speaking used to feel like climbing a mountain. But slowly, it started feeling normal. It became like a daily habit. And when something becomes a habit, fear disappears automatically. One very important thing I want you to understand is that speaking does not require a partner in the beginning. You do not need a perfect environment. You can start alone. Your room is enough. Your mirror is enough. Your imagination is enough. What matters is practice, not people around you. I also started using a very simple method. I would take small topics and speak about them for 1 or 2 minutes. For example, I would choose a topic like my day, my family, my hobby, or my favorite food. Then I would try to speak continuously without stopping. Even if I made mistakes, I did not care. The goal was not accuracy. The goal was flow. At first, I could only speak for a few seconds. But slowly, I reached 1 minute, then 2 minutes, then 5 minutes. This was a big achievement for me because it showed that my brain was improving. My confidence was growing step by step. Another powerful change happened when I started thinking in English while speaking. Before, I used to think in my native language and then translate, but that was slow and confusing. Later, I started thinking directly in English for simple things. This made speaking much faster and smoother. I also want to tell you something very honest. Speaking English alone may feel strange in the beginning. You might feel shy even when nobody is watching, but that feeling will not last forever. If you continue, your comfort will grow, and once comfort grows, fluency becomes natural. One day I realized something very powerful. I was speaking English without stopping for a few minutes, and I was not even thinking about grammar rules. I was just expressing my thoughts. That moment was very special for me because it showed me that I was no longer just learning English. I was using English. So in this chapter, I want you to remember one simple truth. Speaking is not the end goal. Speaking is the practice. You do not wait to be ready. You become ready by speaking. Start small. Start alone. Start imperfect. But start today. Because every sentence you speak brings you one step closer to fluency. Chapter 4. Now in this chapter, I want to share something that completely changed the way I speak English and understand native speakers. After I started listening every day and practicing speaking alone, I still noticed one problem. My English was improving, but it did not sound natural. I could form sentences, I could express ideas, but something was missing. My speech was still slow. My pronunciation was not smooth. And I still felt like I was thinking too much before speaking. That is when I discovered a very powerful method that changed everything. And that method is called shadowing. Shadowing is very simple but extremely powerful. It means you listen to a native speaker and repeat exactly what they say at the same time, or just after them. You copy their words, their tone, their rhythm, and even their emotions. At first it feels strange. It feels like you are just copying without understanding. But slowly, it trains your brain and mouth to work together naturally. When I first tried shadowing, I failed many times. I could not keep up with the speed of native speakers. I would miss words. I would stop in the middle. I would feel frustrated. But I did not stop. I reduced my speed. I started with very slow English videos. I chose simple conversations. I listened carefully and repeated line by line. Something very interesting started happening after a few days. My mouth started adjusting to English sounds. My tongue started moving more comfortably. Words that were difficult before started becoming easier. I did not have to think about pronunciation anymore. It started coming naturally. This is the power of repetition. When you repeat something again and again, your brain creates a pattern, and that pattern becomes automatic. Many learners make a big mistake here. They try to learn pronunciation by reading rules. But pronunciation is not theory. It is practice. You cannot learn speaking by only reading about speaking. You must hear it, feel it, and copy it. Shadowing gives you that exact experience. I remember I used to pick short videos, sometimes only 1 minute long. I would listen to one sentence and repeat it 5 or 6 times. I would try to match the speaker's speed, tone, and emotion. If the speaker was excited, I tried to sound excited. If the speaker was calm, I tried to sound calm. This helped me understand that English is not just words, it is also feeling. Another powerful thing I noticed was improvement in listening. When you shadow, you are not only speaking, you are also listening very carefully. You start noticing small details in pronunciation. You start hearing words that you never noticed before. Your ears become trained. Slowly, even fast English starts becoming understandable. At the beginning, I was not perfect at all. I made many mistakes. Sometimes I could not understand half of the sentence. But I kept going. I told myself that perfection is not the goal. Progress is the goal. Even 10% improvement is enough if you continue every day. I also learned that shadowing builds confidence. When you can repeat native speakers, you feel like you are closer to real English. You stop feeling like English is foreign. It starts feeling familiar. And when something feels familiar, fear disappears. You stop being afraid of speaking. You start enjoying it. One very important thing I want you to remember is that shadowing is not about memorizing. It is about training your mouth and brain together. You are not trying to remember sentences. You are trying to develop muscle memory. Just like athletes practice movements again and again, you are practicing speech patterns. I also combined shadowing with listening. First, I would listen to a short clip without stopping. Then I would listen again and repeat after the speaker. Then I would try shadowing without subtitles. This three-step method helped me improve very fast. My brain started recognizing patterns automatically. Over time, I noticed something amazing. When I spoke in real conversations, some sentences came out naturally without thinking. I did not translate. I did not stop. I just spoke. That was a big moment for me because it showed that shadowing was working. Another benefit of shadowing is that it improves your accent naturally. You do not need to force any accent. You just copy what you hear. Slowly, your speech starts sounding clearer and more natural. Your rhythm becomes better. Your stress on words becomes correct. Everything improves step by step. I also want to tell you something very important. Do not worry if you cannot understand everything in the beginning. That is completely normal. Even if you understand only 30%, it is still useful. The goal is not full understanding. The goal is training. Sometimes I used to feel tired or bored while shadowing, but I made it a habit. I told myself I will do just 10 minutes every day. And that small effort made a big difference over time. Consistency is more important than intensity. You do not need to practice for hours. You just need to practice every day. So in this chapter, I want you to understand one powerful truth. If listening builds your brain and speaking builds your confidence, then shadowing builds your fluency. It connects everything together. It trains your ears, your mouth, and your mind at the same time. If you really want to sound natural in English, then start shadowing today, even if it feels difficult at first. Because every small repetition is building your fluency silently inside you. Chapter 5. Now in this chapter, I want to talk about something that brings everything together. After listening every day, after speaking alone, and after practicing shadowing, I still noticed one missing piece in my English journey. I could understand more, I could speak better, and I could even repeat native speakers. But my thinking was still slow. I still needed time to form sentences in my mind. I still translated in my head in many situations. That is when I realized the next powerful step in learning English, and that is reading, writing, and thinking in English. Let me start with reading. Many learners think reading is boring or only for advanced students, but that is not true. Reading is one of the easiest and most powerful ways to improve your English. When you read simple English every day, your brain starts learning sentence structure naturally. You start seeing how words connect with each other. You start understanding how ideas are formed in English. When I started reading, I did not choose difficult books. I started with very simple stories, short articles, and easy English content. At first, I read slowly. I stopped many times. I checked meanings of words. But I did not give up. I continued reading every day. Slowly, something amazing started happening. I started recognizing common patterns. I started seeing repeated sentence structures. My brain started getting familiar with how English sentences are built. One very important thing I learned is that reading should not be rushed. You do not need to read fast. You need to read clearly and understand the meaning. Even if you read one page a day, it is enough if you do it daily. Consistency is more powerful than quantity. I also started reading out loud. This was a game changer for me. When you read out loud, you are not only using your eyes, but also your mouth and ears. You see the sentence, you speak it, and you hear it. This combination makes learning much stronger. My pronunciation started improving. My speaking became smoother. And my confidence increased. Now let's talk about writing. Writing is one of the most powerful tools for thinking in English. When you write, you are forced to organize your thoughts. You cannot just think in random ideas. You must turn your thoughts into structured sentences. This trains your brain to think in English naturally. I started with very simple writing. Every day, I wrote a few lines about my day. I did not care about grammar mistakes. I did not care about perfection. I just focused on expressing myself. For example, I would write simple sentences like, I went to the market today. I met my friend. I felt happy. These small sentences were enough in the beginning. Slowly, my writing improved. I started using longer sentences. I started connecting ideas. I started using new vocabulary that I learned from reading. Writing became a daily habit for me. It did not feel like study anymore. It felt like expression. One very powerful habit I developed was keeping an English journal. Every night before sleeping, I would write about my day in English. This helped me reflect and also practice sentence formation. Over time, I noticed that my thinking was slowly shifting into English. And that brings us to the most powerful part of this chapter. Thinking in English. This is the goal of every English learner. When you stop translating in your head and start thinking directly in English, your fluency improves dramatically. At the beginning, thinking in English is not easy. I used to think in my native language first and then translate sentence by sentence. This made me slow and confused. But after listening, speaking, shadowing, reading, and writing daily, something started changing. My brain slowly started forming simple English thoughts automatically. For example, instead of thinking about my day in my native language, I would think simple sentences like today is a busy day or I need to finish my work. These small thoughts started coming naturally without effort. This was a big breakthrough in my journey. I also practiced thinking in English during daily activities. When I was walking, I would describe what I see in English. When I was eating, I would think about food in English. When I was traveling, I would narrate my surroundings in English in my mind. This made English a part of my life, not just a study subject. One important thing I want you to understand is that thinking in English does not happen overnight. It is a slow process. It happens step by step. First you listen, then you speak, then you read, then you write. And slowly your mind starts thinking in English naturally. Another powerful thing I learned is that mistakes in writing and thinking are completely normal. I made many mistakes in my journal. I wrote wrong sentences. I used wrong grammar. But I never stopped, because mistakes are part of learning. Every mistake teaches you something new. As I continued this practice, I noticed a big improvement in my fluency. I could speak faster. I could understand faster. I could express my ideas more clearly. My English started feeling natural instead of forced. So, in this chapter, I want you to remember one simple truth. Reading builds your understanding. Writing builds your structure. Thinking builds your fluency. When you combine all three with listening and speaking, your English starts improving in a complete and natural way. You stop translating. You start thinking. And that is the real beginning of fluency. Chapter 6. Now we have reached the final chapter. And in this chapter, I want to share the most powerful truth about learning English. Everything you learned in the previous chapters, listening, speaking, shadowing, reading, writing, and thinking, all of it becomes truly effective only when you bring it into your daily life. Because the real secret of English fluency is not just study, it is living the language every single day. Many learners make one big mistake. They separate English from their real life. They think English is something they do for 1 hour of study and then forget for the rest of the day. They open a book, they watch a video, they practice a little, and then they go back to their normal life in their native language. But this creates a gap, and that gap stops fluency from growing. When I understood this, I changed everything. I stopped treating English like a subject and started treating it like a lifestyle. I began to bring English into every small moment of my day. Not in a stressful way, but in a natural and simple way. I started using English while doing normal daily activities. This is what I call immersion, which means surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. For example, when I woke up in the morning, I did not immediately switch to my native language thoughts. Instead, I started thinking simple English sentences like, today is a new day, or I will try to learn something new today. When I brushed my teeth, I would think in English about what I was doing. When I made tea or breakfast, I would describe the process in English in my mind. I am making tea. I am adding sugar. I am drinking it slowly. These small habits made a huge difference over time. At first, it felt a little unnatural. I had to remind myself to think in English, but slowly, it became automatic. My brain started switching into English mode without effort. That is when I realized that immersion is not something you force. It is something you build step by step until it becomes natural. I also changed the way I used my phone and media. Instead of using only my native language content, I started watching more English videos, listening to English audio, and reading English posts. I did not try to understand everything perfectly. I just stayed exposed to the language. My brain started adapting without pressure. One very powerful habit I developed was replacing small parts of my day with English. For example, instead of scrolling social media in my native language, I would watch short English clips. Instead of listening to only local songs, I would listen to English songs. Instead of thinking silently in my native language, I would try to narrate my thoughts in English. These small changes created a big transformation over time. Another important part of immersion is self-talk in daily life. I would talk to myself in English while doing simple tasks. If I was cleaning my room, I would say, "I am cleaning my room. It looks better now." If I was planning my day, I would say I need to finish my work and then study English. This made English feel like a natural language of my thoughts, not just a study subject. I also started observing the world around me in English. When I saw objects, I named them in English in my mind. When I saw people, I would think simple descriptions in English. When I experienced emotions, I would try to express them in English words. Happy, tired, excited, or confused. This helped me connect English with real-life experiences. One of the biggest changes I noticed was in my confidence. Earlier, English felt like something outside of me, something foreign and difficult. But after daily immersion, English started feeling like a part of me. I stopped translating everything. I stopped hesitating so much. I started reacting in English naturally in simple situations. I also want to tell you something very important. Immersion does not mean you have to be perfect all the time. It does not mean you have to understand every word you hear or speak perfect sentences all day. It simply means staying connected with English regularly. Even small exposure counts. Even small practice matters. Even a few minutes of English thinking can make a difference. There were days when I was tired or busy, and I could not study properly. But even on those days, I kept English alive in small ways. I would listen to a short audio before sleeping. I would think a few sentences in English during the day. I would read just a few lines. This kept my connection strong. And that consistency is what creates long-term success. Over time, something amazing happened. English stopped feeling like something I was learning. It started feeling like something I was living. I could understand conversations more easily. I could respond faster. I could think without translating. My brain was slowly adjusting to English as a natural language. This is the final stage of learning English. Not perfection, not memorization, but natural usage. When English becomes part of your life, you no longer need to force it. It flows naturally in your thoughts, your speech, and your understanding. So in this final chapter, I want you to understand one deep truth. Fluency does not come from studying English for a short time. It comes from living with English every day. The more you include English in your daily routine, the more natural it becomes. And when it becomes natural, you are no longer just a learner. You become a user of the language.